So if you clicked onto this video, it means you want to build an audience as a content creator while working a full-time job. But I'm also going to assume two things. So I'm going to assume that you want to do it in a way that is sustainable and doesn't take over your entire life. And number two, you also want to actually make some good money from your content. Well, I've been a full-time content creator for 2 years now, and I've built my audience to 420,000. And in this video, I'm going to break down exactly how I would do that again if I was starting from scratch with a full-time job. So back in 2021, I was working full-time and I had a 9-to-5 job. I was on the phones selling home insurance. It was the most boring thing imaginable. And at that time, I was also trying to make money online. So I was trying to build up an online business. And one of the things I tried was a YouTube channel. So I tried to get into content creation. And I would love to sit here and tell you that I had this all figured out from day one and that it was a huge success. But unfortunately, that channel failed miserably. Like, I just completely burnt out. But the interesting part is that it wasn't the filming that burnt me out, or it wasn't the editing. The thing that burnt me out was the pressure I was putting on myself. I was putting this pressure on myself to grow as quickly as possible and to get as many subscribers as possible. And I had all this pressure to make my videos perfect, like all the famous YouTubers. And that self-imposed pressure just completely sucked the life out of me. And like I said, I just completely burnt out. But the good news is that this is a very solvable issue. And it's a trap that can be very easily avoided if you play it right. Because it's not like you don't have enough time to become a content creator if you have a full-time job. I mean, there are endless examples of creators who started their journey while working a 9-to-5. The actual issue is that you're comparing yourself to creators who have been doing this for years. And these full-time creators might even have a team of people to help them. And I'll be honest with you, you're probably being a little bit unfair on yourself by comparing your situation to these successful creators. And you're beating yourself up for not moving as fast as the creators who have been doing this full-time for years. And I kind of want to start this video by giving you permission to maybe lighten that pressure that I know you're putting onto yourself to grow as quickly as possible and to make your videos as perfect as possible. Because I believe this self-imposed pressure is one of the biggest reasons why new creators waste years trying to grow on social media, especially when they have a full-time job. So with that in mind, what I want to give you right now is a very realistic, practical roadmap that you can follow to help you stay consistent, stay sane, and to start growing a real audience without sacrificing everything else in your life. So step number one is to create a schedule that you can actually stick to long term. So I'm sure you understand the importance of consistency when it comes to content creation. And it's definitely one of the most commonly given pieces of advice, to be consistent. And there is a reason for that. If you're consistent, that tells the algorithm that you are reliable and that you're going to show up for your audience. So of course, it's going to push your content harder. But this is especially important if you're a creator working a full-time job. Because one of the worst things that you can do is overcommit to an uploading schedule that you're just not going to be able to stick to long term. For example, you don't want to think, right, I'm going to get home from work every day, I'm going to film a video every single evening and edit it until 2 a.m. just so that I can post every single day. Like, obviously, you're just going to burn out. Because as we all know, life is unpredictable. Life throws us curveballs. We all have personal struggles that we deal with sometimes. And that's just how life works. And that is why we need to create a content schedule that you can actually stick to come rain or shine. And this is so interesting because it means that avoiding that dreaded burnout is actually not that difficult. Because I think that all burnout is just overcommitting to an unrealistic level of output and then just not being able to maintain that output. Whereas if you commit to an uploading schedule that you know that you can maintain, then the chances of you burning out become way smaller. So let's get specific here because this applies to YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, whatever platform you're trying to get into. We want to ask ourselves, what is the minimum amount of videos I could post per week, even on my worst weeks? And I'm not saying that you can't post more than that if you have some free time, but what I'm saying is you need a minimum amount that you can actually stick to if you're having a bad week. Because the harsh truth is that if your schedule only works when life is perfect and everything is stress-free, then you don't really have a schedule and you're probably not going to get consistent. Okay, so step number two is that now we have a realistic schedule that we can actually stick to, we need to understand the importance of the Pareto Principle. And this is where things get interesting because if you're juggling a full-time job and you're trying to get into content creation, your first instinct is to assume that you need more time. But that's not necessarily true because your biggest problem isn't that you need more time, it's how you're using the limited time that you already have. And this is where the Pareto Principle comes in. So if you don't know what this principle is, it's that roughly 80% of your results come from about 20% of your efforts. So when it comes to content creation, we need to figure out which 20% of our efforts are giving us the most leverage and actually moving us forward and basically just do more of that. So I'll give you a personal example. So back in the day when I had that, that failed YouTube channel that I was telling you about, I spent so long obsessing over the channel banner, my profile picture, and even all these little fancy editing tricks that nobody was ever going to notice. And like I said, I had a full-time job, so I didn't have, hours and hours to be worrying about these low leverage tasks. And I actually think that's probably the main reason why that channel failed and why I ended up burning out. But we can actually take this one step further because we can start to identify what I call asymmetric inputs. So these are things that don't really require a massive amount of time, but they give you a huge amount of progress and momentum towards your goals. And let's get really specific here. So I'll give you some examples. So we have bullet point scripting a video. So that's very high leverage, very important. And then we have filming. So that's obviously very high leverage, very good use of your time. And even things like improving the hook of your video. So, that intro section of the video that you use to captivate your audience, making improvements to that is also very high leverage. But when it comes to, updating your profile picture for the 5th time, that's obviously very low leverage. Or refilming an entire video because you don't like the way your voice sounds. Obviously, again, that's very low leverage. Or even, refreshing your YouTube analytics every 5 minutes. That is extremely low leverage. And by the way, I'm using these examples because these are things that I've wasted so much time on my own journey. So I would say if you take one thing from this video, it's to prioritize the tasks that actually give you momentum. And that is how you're going to start to see results really early on, even if you're working a full-time job. So step number 3 is finding the path of least resistance. And I absolutely love this concept because now that we've identified the tasks that matter the most, now we need to make those tasks as easy, as streamlined, and as headache-free as possible. So how do we actually do this then? How do we make these high leverage tasks as effortless as possible? Now, this kind of depends on your setup and your lifestyle, but I'll give you a few ideas that you might find valuable. So the first idea to make your life a lot easier when you're creating content is to not script your videos literally word for word. And I actually mentioned this in a previous video, and a lot of people seem to resonate with it. I got quite a few comments on the video about this idea specifically. Because if you wanted to script a 15-minute video, let's say, you would probably have to write about 2,000, maybe even 2,500 words. And you got to ask yourself, do I want to write a 2,500 word essay every time that I want to film a YouTube video? And again, you have a full-time job, so we don't have all the time in the world to write these, very, very long scripts. Now, I will be honest, it's a little bit more difficult at first to film a video from bullet points because you need to become a little bit more fluid and a little bit more conversational, but you do get used to it very quickly and it just saves you so much time and so much energy as well. Okay, so another way to make your life way easier when it comes to making the most of your time is to stick to just one format. So if you're trying to make reels and TikToks and long form YouTube videos, and you're also writing a newsletter, trying to do all that at once is very time consuming. And it also takes a lot of energy to figure out all of these different platforms. Now, if you're a bit stuck on what platform to get started on, I generally recommend YouTube because while it is harder to grow at first, it's much easier to build trust with your audience when you do start to get views, and it's also much easier to build a business in the long term. But of course, it's completely up to you. I first started to get results on social media with Instagram Reels, but it's just about whatever platform or whatever style of content resonates with you the most. Now, the last thing I want to say isn't really part of the roadmap, but it's definitely a tip that I wish someone had told me when I was first getting started. And that is that you are going to have to make sacrifices, but do not make sacrifices at the expense of your sanity. Now, yes, we did talk about the fact that finding more time isn't going to be your biggest issue, but I can guarantee that there are certain things that you're doing throughout the week that you could sacrifice if you're taking this journey seriously. Now, this might be something like binging Netflix or binging YouTube or going out drinking at the weekend. There is definitely something that you can get rid of that you're doing regularly in order to pursue this dream. But what you can't give up is your well-being, your mental health, your exercise routine. You can't give up your capacity to actually enjoy the process of building this thing that you care about. Because at the end of the day, you're not building this new life so that you can be more stressed than you were when you were just working a 9 to 5. So yeah, make sacrifices, but just don't sacrifice the parts of yourself that matter the most. As cliche as that sounds. And if this video helped you even just a little bit, then you're going to get a lot from this next one. So in this video right here, I'm going to give you 8 brutally honest pieces of advice about becoming a content creator. So yeah, click onto that video and I'll see you there.